Hello and welcome to the first in what will be a series of GSA Snapshot webinars this year. Over the next 30 minutes or so, our research team will share their key takeaways from the Mobile World Congress earlier this month, including the latest developments in devices, infrastructure trends, including 5G standalone, in private mobile networks and in fixed wireless access, in satellite to phone, and of course, the Metaverse. First, a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into today's event. You can download today's presentation from within the webinar room at any point during the event by moving your mouse over the slides and clicking on the download icon in the top right of the screen. An on-demand recording of the entire discussion will be shared with you immediately after the event as well. Following the readout of the presentation from the team, there will be a Q&A session with the speakers. So you can submit questions at any time using the questions function on the sidebar. Please do pose your questions as we go through and we'll draw on them during the closing Q&A. But to get things started, I'll hand you over to Simon Bryant, VP Research at GSA, to kick off the webinar and introduce the team joining him today. Simon.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's a pleasure to be here. Welcome to this webinar. As Richard mentioned, my name is Simon Bryant. I manage the team here at GSA that focuses on GSA Research. We have a dedicated team of researchers who are compiling lots of information that's global, that I'll introduce in a second, that's producing the reports and GAMBoD published via the GSA website. The GSA Research program is supplied exclusively by CCS Insight, where I wear a second hat leading their channel and supply chain research. It's my pleasure to welcome two esteemed colleagues from CCS Insight on this call. We have Richard Webb, who leads the network infrastructure practice at CCS Insight. We also have Ben Wood, who's the chief analyst at the business. And also waiting in the wings to help with the Q&A is Kester Mann, who's the director of our consumer and connectivity practice. It's great to have them joining us on this call. So today we're going to take you through some of our impressions of what we saw at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona this year. We had a large team there covering really all corners or most corners of the telecoms industry, and today we're going to share our views on what we saw there. By way of a brief introduction to GSA before we get into the content of this presentation, for those who are less familiar, GSA is the leading association representing the technology and equipment ecosystem around telecoms. Today, the association has 90 associates and members, and that number continues to grow. We have 9 exec members, MediaTek most recently joining Apple, Ericsson, Huawei, Intel, Nokia, Qualcomm, Samsung, and ZTE. GSA is involved in a number of areas representing the mobile suppliers ecosystem. We produce a lot of research, and I highlighted that my team are engaged in producing and delivering that. That's a lot of original research that's very much global, covering really most parts of the telecoms ecosystem. We publish around 160 outputs annually, which includes reports, also populating the GAMBoD database, which you might have heard of. And that's a database that has lots of information across public, private networks, devices, chipsets, spectrum, and operators. As well as the research that's produced by the association, we have a dedicated spectrum group that advocates for the use of spectrum for IMT technologies. The association also has a dedicated standards group. It also has some focus groups and special interest groups. Noteworthy is worth mentioning the Fixed Wireless Access Forum, which is started a couple of years ago. It's growing very, very strongly. Lots of momentum behind that group. As of yesterday, they announced their 53 member. They do a number of different activities. They have a fixed wireless access directory, which I'm going to show very briefly at the end of this presentation. We also have a private mobile network special interest group, which was started in 2021, and that as well is growing very strongly. The members of that group, including Nokia, Huawei, Ericsson, Airspan, Mavenir, Keysight Technologies, and more to be announced soon, are providing confidential references of private mobile networks, confidentially I might add, every quarter, that's producing the most complete granular reporting on private mobile networks globally at the moment, and that's a space that's growing for the GSA very strongly. Very briefly, before I hand over to Ben, I just want to highlight some key reports that are coming up from the GSA Research team over the next 3 months. Overall, we'll be publishing a little over 20 reports. We'll also be updating the GAMBoD database 10 times over that time period, the various parts of the GAMBoD database. But I want to call out these few reports here of particular note. So we have the team are working at the moment on a report on satellite NTN, looking at activity in terms of operators and companies investing and launching in satellite NTN programs. The private mobile network quarterly update will be updated again at the end of May, reporting on references to the end of Q1. We'll be, for the first time, doing a report focused on 3GPP technology roadmap, a 5G connections market update based on some CCS Insight data, a fixed wireless access market status, the very popular forum member survey, which we're starting work on at the moment. That will be published around June time. And we have an update of our 2G, 3G sunset report as well coming up. So on that point, I'm going to hand over to Ben to cover the major themes that we saw at Mobile World Congress. Over to you, Ben.
Fantastic. Thank you, Simon. And good afternoon, good morning to everyone around the world joining us today. We have over 100 people on the line. This year, GSMA was a real return to form, a vintage show with 88,000 attendees. We saw the Chinese return, some of the people from North America who'd been nervous about coming in 2022 because of the pandemic were there as well. On the right-hand side, you can see a chart from a media company we refer to, and these were the kind of share of voice of stories. They're not necessarily the biggest themes at the show, but in terms of media coverage from the show, 5G was strong. AI was the buzzword of the year. Lots of people piling in there. Some chatter around the metaverse, security, and sustainability. Smartphones were not as prominent as they were, say, a decade ago when the major manufacturers did all their big launches at MWC, but still made a meaningful contribution to the show, and I'll be talking about that later. On the network side, key technologies, 5G, a bit about 6G. My personal view is we've got enough Gs at the moment, but there was some early chatter about that, and it's always nice to see where future technology goes. Private networks, hot topic, and as Simon pointed out, some excellent research available from the GSA on that topic. Network APIs, another interesting growth area. Around the augmented reality space, there were extended reality demos, smart glasses, and some audio developments, which I will cover as well. So at that point, I'll hand over to Richard. And we go to the next slide, please.
Ben. If I could have the next slide, please. So as Director of Network Infrastructure, a lot of my focus at Mobile World Congress this year was looking at network infrastructure solutions. So, of course, a lot of the emphasis was on 5G. In particular, you know, it was interesting to see the themes around 5G beginning to shift over time. We can see, as you see on the chart on the slide there, there's a real growth in the number of live 5G networks and number of operators who are deploying those commercial 5G networks. That's something we track on behalf of the GSA quarter by quarter. But what about the success of those networks? And that was really where that monetization of 5G theme played out within Mobile World Congress. You know, yes, we're going to see 5G connections grow to around 3 billion this year, but are operators actually leveraging that customer base and really building those kind of new 5G oriented service models that are enabling them to cash in on that infrastructure investment? So there's a lot of talk about how they're going to achieve that. And that was really what I was interested in. So firstly, those kind of consumer use cases around things like cloud gaming and interactive TV, AR and VR that we'll talk about a little bit in a moment, and also a few other things as well, a little bit more esoteric, but one that I thought was very interesting from one of the Chinese vendor ZTE, which was more of a kind of cultural tour, an interactive smart TV related service, mostly focused towards the elderly demographic, in which they could undertake 3D interactive museum tours and tours of tourist exhibitions and venues and landmarks throughout the world, all from the comfort of their living room. But in with that was wrapped around a kind of social interactivity, messaging service, video interaction with other members who are sharing that experience online, as well as remote healthcare alerts and things like that. So actually a very well bundled and put together service that was orientated around this experience, but had other facilities running alongside in the background. So that really looked like not just a service package, but very much targeted around the needs of a specific demographic. So I thought that was very interesting as a potential 5G monetization environment for consumers. There was a lot in the enterprise space as well, focused on private mobile networks. Again, more of that in a few moments. But we've really seen the messaging at the show evolve over the last year around those enterprise credentials amongst the solution providers, many of whom have some direct channels to the enterprise market space themselves, or are already building those partnerships that will enable them to work with their operator customer base and get really deep into very specific vertical channels. So a lot of messaging around that kind of enterprise integrated solution and deep market knowledge credentials from the solution providers. And then what I was hoping to see, but perhaps didn't see quite so much, was some of that kind of assistance from the solution provider community to operators around modeling 5G services. How do we create different tiers of payment, different payment mechanisms? How do we help operators not just understand how to build a differentiated solution from a technological perspective, but also from a commercial perspective? So perhaps that'll be something that evolves over the next 12 months. Next slide, please. So with that kind of service environment, both on the consumer side and on the enterprise side, there was a little bit more talk about, well, how does that play into the evolution of 5G from a networks perspective? And of course, that led on to a conversation about 5G standalone, the kind of second phase of 5G network evolution, as it were. And again, this is something that is tracked within the GSA reports that CCS Insights is producing on behalf of the association. And you can see that 5G standalone growth there on the chart. It's the dark red part of the chart. So really from the back end of 2020, we saw 5G standalone beginning to emerge in a few early markets. It is definitely growing, though it's not, I would say, rapidly accelerating at this point in time. And partly, aside from the investment in the infrastructure upgrades, is that question around commercial modeling. That actually is quite an interesting thing when you wrap it into the notion of differentiated connectivity, because of course 5G standalone is one of the great enablers of network slicing. So network slicing is really one of those tools that we expect to see operators want to pick up and run with as they build those 5G services. So it's going to be a slow build, but it is definitely happening. We did see a few announcements from Mobile World Congress around this, one from Telefonica announcing an end-to-end network slicing trial with various partners, Cisco, Mavenir, Nokia, and NTT Data. And perhaps this will also get an injection of growth alongside private mobile networks. So we're seeing a little bit of a standoff between private mobile networks on the one hand and network slicing as kind of different ways to skin the same cat, perhaps. So let's move on to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So a huge wealth of information and launches and announcements and demos around private mobile networks this year. So a really exciting part of the business. CCS Insight has been working with the GSA's special interest group on private mobile networks. So it's something we've been very involved with tracking the growth of. And, I do urge you all to check out the GSA reports focused on that particular area. And as you can see from a data excerpt from that report, the growth in private mobile networks is happening with some considerable acceleration at the moment, though it is important to note a lot of those live commercial private mobile networks that we're tracking on screen in that chart are still 4G based. So one of the things we look at in the report is the conversion to 5G within that market. But a lot of news, a lot of activity, most of it around solution providers, positioning with partners to serve this market. But the big news there was really the acquisition of Athonet, which is a private 5G core networking specialist that was acquired by HPE as part of its expanding network portfolio for enterprise alongside its existing Wi-Fi product. So a lot of positioning, a lot of activity, lots of trials and demos and use cases being announced, and some announcements of activity from operators, but it's still really to find its real top gear as far as that market goes. Next slide, please. So last one from me, the Metaverse. It was a huge splash last year. It did continue somewhat a little bit more, I would say, with that thread of reality, pardon the pun, within that extended reality environment from operators this year. A little bit more focus on how are we actually going to make this work. So still focus on what do we need from a networks perspective, not just in terms of capacity and latency, but also around, like I said, that commercial modeling of this kind of service. We did see quite a lot of announcements from operators, lots of activity on the show floor, and we've got a few photos there. Lots of demos, one involving a helicopter, which exhibitors could queue up and kind of get a go at trialing that out and seeing what it was like to have a simulated helicopter pilot session via Metaverse interface. But I still think we're a couple of years from really seeing this go prime time from operators to any given extent. But it really is shaping up to be quite a hot area, a lot of operator activity. So clearly for the consumer market, particularly, we're seeing the push from operators. My feeling is that actually a lot of the real juice in this particular market is going to be around enterprise. Maybe it's going to come on the back of that private mobile network and or network slicing environment where you've got that differentiated connectivity. But my feeling is a lot of the revenue opportunity is perhaps more inclined towards enterprise. Something I could talk about at greater length if we had more time. We do have a report about it that you see referenced on screen, so do please check that out. But in the meantime, I'm going to pass over on the kind of theme of XR and AR over to Ben Wood to tell you more from the devices side. Ben.
Thank you very much, Richard. Excellent summary. Let's turn to smart glasses. There were a number of smart glasses on show at MWC, albeit all prototypes. And I think we were excited to see them, but struggle a little bit to be inspired because they seem to be so far away from commercial reality. On the top left-hand side were the Oppo AirGlass 2 glasses. These are a binocular set of glasses with a single color green display. Size and weight was super impressive, not a lot more than the glasses that I wear on a daily basis. And they were able to provide things like a teleprompter, giving you the text of your speech in front of you, translation, mapping services, alerts, and even music through a Bluetooth headset built into the glasses. You can also see there the Xiaomi Wireless AR Glass Explorer Edition under glass there. That was a concept device using Qualcomm's platform, the XR2 chipset, although that has now been updated to AR2. So we think these were quite prototype products. On the right-hand side, the TCL Ray Neo X2 glasses. These were the most impressive in my view from having tried them. Binocular color heads-up display, real-time translation, which I used with a Chinese colleague who spoke to me in Chinese, and I got English instantly on the glasses. But they're verging on the ridiculous when you wear them, and a long way from prime time. Some other things there as well, a couple of reference devices, one from an ODM called Gertech, who were working with Qualcomm, and Qualcomm's own reference device there as well. Turning to the smartphone space, and if we go on to the next slide, You can see some stats from the GSA there in terms of the number of devices that are out there right now. There's some big numbers, but I just wanted to highlight a few smartphones that got our attention. Now, the reality is that the standard candy bar mobile phone has got a bit boring. They all kind of look the same, but the ones that caught our eye were firstly the Honor Magic 5 Pro, bottom right-hand side, a very competent product from Honor. Honor are very keen to expand their market presence in Europe. They see a huge opportunity given they are effectively locked out of North America and some other markets. Honor is a fully independent company now, but its DNA lies in Huawei, and you can see the expertise that has transferred over, the knowledge transfer that has gone into Honor in terms of the quality of the device and the capabilities of the device. We were really impressed that this new product was able to achieve a first place in the global rankings by DxOMark, an independent test house, where it was awarded best camera and best display, beating other products from Samsung, Apple, and other rivals. So a testament to how hard they are working. Of course, these sorts of rankings are very subjective, but even being in the top 5 would be a tremendous achievement. On the top left-hand side, you can see the Xiaomi 13 Pro, another premium flagship smart home with the latest chipsets and camera capabilities, a triple 50 megapixel camera. The reason I have included this is not quite so positive as Honor. It's more the fact that Xiaomi have historically been considered as a very aggressively priced player in the handset market. And usually they will offer high-tier, high-spec devices or devices in the mid-tier, but with big specifications like 5G support at very punchy prices. They offered a huge, they had a huge launch event at MWC, but the audience was stunned into silence when they announced the price of this product, the Xiaomi 13 Pro, at 1,300 euros. That's 100 euros more than the Honor device I talked about at the beginning, and more expensive than rival Samsung products. I think this underlines the changes Xiaomi is having to make to its business with regards having to have a better margin in its business as it struggles to recover from a very poor 2012. Another interesting product was the TCL product using screen technology called Next Paper, which is something that TCL has been innovating around in the tablet space. It offers a non-reflective display, which is very resistant to fingerprints, is very easy to read in bright sunlight, has some power advantages, but not huge. And I think this is an interesting area of differentiation for TCL in the mid-tier space. One final device that I will mention is the Realme GT3. That's not pictured here, but is a device that had the fast charging capability and the ability to charge the phone in a mere 10 minutes through a 240-watt charger. I have some concerns about really pushing batteries as hard as this, but Realme says that that will give you 1,600 charges over a kind of 4-year period, and the ultimate impact would be a battery health of about 80% at the end of it. I think there's probably more testing that needs to be done, but we'll see. Turning to my next slide, I want to just talk a little bit about foldables and rollables, because if if bar phones, slate phones are boring these days, there's plenty of innovation going on in the foldable space. So on the top left-hand side, you have the Samsung products, the Galaxy Z Flip and Z Fold. These are the market makers for the foldable category. They have definitely put this category on the map and are by far and away the most successful. However, other companies are coming into the marketplace. A product like this device here, the Honor Magic VS, which is a very capable device coming in at 1,600 euros, a high-tier premium product trying to support Honor's brand. On the bottom left-hand side, you can see a couple of products. There is the Honor N2 Flip, which you can see here, which has a larger external display than the Galaxy Z Flip. It's running ahead of expectations here in Europe. Oppo are putting a lot of energy and investment into this, and all of our research is showing that this flip form factor is proving to be extremely popular. The more mini tablet form factor is a little more challenging. Although Oppo do also have this book-like design. So if you compare the two products, so here we have the Oppo Find N2, and next to it, if I can get enough hands, you can see the Honor device. You can see it's a kind of different orientation, a little bit more stumpy, and it feels great in the hand. So loads of innovation. And we also saw Chinese company Techno, who are experts in the sub-Saharan African market, often a top 3 or top 5 player there with basic mid-range smartphones, now moving up the value chain. They announced the Techno Phantom 5 foldable, and that device will be 1,200 euros versus the Honor device, which is very similar at 1,600 euros. One other notable mention are Rollables. Bottom right-hand side, you can see a suite of devices with concept devices, I should add. These are far from being prime time. Concept devices that have rollable displays. So you can see the laptop and phone on show from Motorola. The laptop, the screen extends upwards to give you more real estate on your laptop. And on the phone, similarly, the screen extends upwards to give you a bigger screen on the device. It rolls around the back of the phone. So on the bottom right-hand side, you can see the screen rolling around the back. I thought this was a very compelling design. Motorola allowed me hands-on time with the product. That's my hand in the picture. It's several years from prime time, but certainly another opportunity for innovation in the smartphone space. Turning to satellite in phones, which is another interesting market opportunity. And someone mentioned this in the chat as well. This kind of race started back in September 2022 when Apple announced the iPhone 14 with the emergency SOS function, which is a direct-to-satellite messaging solution. Since then, we've seen a number of manufacturers announcing products in this area. Bullet, who are most famous for making the Cat-branded phones, announced at CES that they would be offering phones and a device. Qualcomm also announced support for satellite at CES. At MWC, we saw some of this coming to fruition. So Bullet announced 2 smartphones in partnership with a MediaTek chipset and Skylo, providing coverage through the Globalstar satellite network. And they also announced this $99 Bluetooth dongle, which has satellite capability as well, which compare to any smartphone and use an app to do 2-way satellite messaging. So that's the first to market Android device. Qualcomm announced partnerships with Honor, Motorola, Nothing, Oppo, Vivo, and Xiaomi to offer Snapdragon satellite in their future products. We don't expect that those products will come to market until early 2024, but our expectation is that satellite in phones, premium smartphones, will be a default inclusion for the highest tier of products. One additional pointer, we heard a lot of talk of NTN, non-terrestrial networks, demonstrations from MediaTek of the ability to connect to a low Earth orbit satellite constellation to allow basic voice and data. This will take time, and I think that the technology will come, but it's several years away, and that will add a whole new dimension. In terms of satellite messaging, it will be very popular in markets with big land masses like North America, Australia, Africa, and parts of Latin America. Next slide, please. Moving over to fixed wireless access. On the fixed wireless access side of things, I think I'm covering this slide. It was just to say that we did see a number of dedicated sessions talking about this at Mobile World Congress. There were also a huge number of CPE devices from a huge array of manufacturers, competitively priced, and we are seeing, in North America, in other markets like Australia, but you can see the total coverage map from the GSA statistics here showing just how strong fixed wireless access broadband services are, with 150 operators across the world offering 5G services, and some good bandwidth available there as an alternative to fixed network solutions. On 5G CPE, the next slide, this really echoes what I was saying in terms of the array of devices that are available. You can see a picture on the bottom left of some of the devices on the MediaTek stand alone, and we saw these right across the show. 177 commercially available 5G fixed wireless CPE access devices, according to the GSA, and that's a regularly updated report that GSA members have access to. One final personal highlight for me, on April the 3rd, it will be 50 years since the first mobile phone call was made by this amazing individual, Dr. Martin Cooper, who was working at Motorola at the time and conceived how a mobile network would work. I have a different hat. I run a charity called the Mobile Phone Museum, and we took our original Motorola Dynatac 8000X to the show, and we're lucky enough to get Martin to sign the device for us. I think this really reflects the amazing journey that the mobile industry has been on. And when you think about the fact that people thought only a few tens of thousands of phones would be sold each year back in the 1980s, and we now have a market where 1.2 billion smartphones will be sold this year, it is quite remarkable. So with that, I'm going to close out the session, and we will move to Q&A. We have a fantastic panel of people available to answer the Q&A. Myself, Richard, Simon is going to coordinate some of this, and we also have Kester if required. So Simon, back to you.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you, Richard, as well. And thank you, the audience, for sending through your questions as we've been presenting. The team have been responding to many of your questions as we've been going through. Some we will have to follow up with after the call because we've got limited time. But let me pose a couple here. So the first one I'm going to pose relates to private mobile networks. Is it possible, and maybe Richard is the best to answer this one, is it possible to detail some of the most relevant segments within the private mobile networks industry being deployed? Actually, I think Richard might have some problems hearing.
Yeah, I can kick-start that off, Simon. And of course, we see some strong vertical markets. I'm sure that Richard will kick in a moment, but you know, we see obviously mining being a great opportunity. We see emergency services and critical response being another opportunity there. Agriculture is a big area. We see you know, things like factory deployments and ports being big areas as well. So I think with private mobile networks, we are seeing some tremendous vertical sector spaces where network operators are starting to realize that it's quite a complex and consultative sale, but interesting that there are some very, very lucrative niches that you can go after and target from a vertical market perspective. So hopefully that gives an initial response, and maybe we could follow up on that question afterwards, Simon, and provide more detail if whoever asked it would like that.
Yeah, no problem at all. There's certainly a wealth of data on the verticals from the GSA data, as Ben highlighted. Okay, another question relates to mobile, to millimeter wave. Ben did answer it in the chat, but maybe we can put it to the wider group. What is the status of millimeter wave generally? Would Ben or Kester like to pick that up?
Kester, I've shared my thoughts. Perhaps you could have a go.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so the question was, is millimeter wave a business failure? I think it's probably too soon to label it as a business failure. I think it's still quite early on its journey, particularly outside of the US. And I look at the European markets where actually spectrum's only been awarded in a relatively small number of countries. So too early to say, but I do think it will be a technology that will be deployed in a different way to previous mobile frequencies. So, for example, a far greater focus on specific local high-density environments, shopping malls, stadia, airports, and so on, which can obviously benefit from the very, very high bandwidth that millimeter wave spectrum offers, but perhaps not necessarily leveraging the propagation, which of course is weaker than at lower frequencies. So I think it's too early to say it's a failure. I think there is absolutely some terrific opportunities for millimeter wave, but in the right environments. And I think the industry needs to be careful around the places in which it's deployed.
Absolutely. And we're going to need device support as well. And some of the handset manufacturers are very reluctant to add to the cost of the bill of materials to support millimeter wave. Right now, Apple is only doing that in the North American market, largely driven by the operators.
Thank you very much. I think we've probably got time for one more question.
Simon, I think we've got a question ready for Richard around private mobile networks and which regulatory approaches are necessary to promote and or facilitate its development. So, Richard, over to you.
Hi. Yeah, so a question regarding regulatory approaches for private mobile networks. I mean, principally, a lot of the regulatory approaches around spectrum. And one thing that we're tracking very closely in the report that you'll see from the GSA is the impact of dedicated spectrum specifically allocated by regulators for private mobile network usage by enterprise being a real stimulator to that particular market. So that's one way that I think you're seeing regulatory support. There have been a few interesting involvements of government as well as part of kind of digital transformation of the economy as a whole within a country being really promoted through kind of putting together industry and technology sectors within the country. So Indonesia, this is really happening. You're seeing a lot of effort from the government to try and put those sectors together to try and, you know, using really 5G and private mobile networks as a vehicle for that interaction to really promote digital transformation of industry and of the economy by association. Seeing quite a lot of involvement from the government in China, really promoting both network slicing and private mobile network industry involvement. So yeah, there are some regulatory approaches and governmental approaches that I think are helping to drive this particular part of the market forward.
Great. One more question. What sort of benefits could we anticipate from 6G? Does anybody want to pick that up from the group as a final question?
I think Kester is well positioned. He's been telling a good story about 6G and green tea. You might want to elaborate.
Yeah. So listen, this is a very early stage on what is going to be a very long journey for 6G. Yes, we did hear about it at MWC, mainly from the Asian operators, particularly Entity Docomo, which had a number of demonstrations on its stand. One was around teaching music, so a student could kind of feel vibrations in his or her fingers, led by a teacher to help him or her play an instrument such as the piano. And there was also a gentleman who was mimicking how to make green tea, and a robot was kind of following those commands. All good stuff and good fun to see at an event like Mobile World Congress, but perhaps not a use case for the here and now. And I kind of echo some of the points that Ben made earlier around 6G, that you know, I think the industry needs to be a little bit careful perhaps around its positioning and its comments on 6G. That the technology has not been standardized yet, it's not been defined, so it's early days. We don't know exactly what it's going to be. I'm led to believe it's going to include terahertz spectrum, huge bandwidths, huge opportunities, but I think we're really waiting for some clear definitions before we get close to that. So it's a very early days for 6G.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Kester and team, for answering those questions. We're going to wrap up the Q&A now. For any questions we haven't answered in this session, we will follow up via email. Everybody will be getting this recording via email after this call. That really just leaves us to say thank you for listening to the presentation. And I do have one quick job I need to do, which is show you the Fixed Wireless Access directory, which is a very exciting development the GSA Fixed Wireless Access Forum have been developing recently. And they've asked me to show it to you. if this works. There we go. So really, all I want to say on this is that, yeah, lots of hard work has been going into this. It's gained significant momentum in the last few months. So at the moment, we have now 23 companies who are have their products on this directory, 139 uploaded products so far. In the directory, you have lots of filtering, so you can sort by the individual suppliers of the 23 that are in there. You can look at product types, whether it be devices or modules, and you can look at device type. Lots of feature and technical segmentations as well. So really thorough ability to segment the products in there. And when you do look on a product, you can see the product description, link to the supplier website, product features, and then other products from that manufacturer. So lots happening there. If there's any interest in that, please, by all means, get in touch with the GSA. But other than that, that really concludes this session. And I would like to hand over to Richard to finish things off.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd just like to close today's session by once again thanking you all for attending, and thanking our speakers from CCS Insight for sharing their perspectives on Mobile World Congress. After the event, you will receive a link to the webinar recording, and the presentations will also be made available for download from the GSA website. In the coming months, we will have more snapshot webinars which dig into the key themes and reports and global data and trends that are being tracked by the GSA's research team. For the latest updates on all GSA research activities and upcoming events, please do follow the GSA on the social channels. You'll find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and on YouTube. And if you visit gsacom.com, you can subscribe to the weekly Research Digest email. So on behalf of the GSA team, all that remains for me to say is thank you once again for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon at the next GSA event. Many thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.